The metal on the bleachers was cold, hard, and the air was thick with a very specific kind of pity. My family's pity. It was directed at me, the ghost at their feast. I sat in my unremarkable civilian clothes, surrounded by them. My father, a man whose silence has funded 1,000 lies. My mother, the chief executive of my failure narrative. And my brother, Alex, the golden child, the guest of honor, beaming in his uniform as he graduated from a program I'd supposedly washed out of. They were so proud. The whole performance was for him. I was just a prop they used to make his success seem even brighter. A cautionary tale in the front row. The ceremony ended. The polite applause started. And then he approached. Alex's drill sergeant. A man who looked like he'd been carved from granite. My parents practically vibrated with pride. Getting ready to accept the praise for the fine son they'd raised, the sergeant's eyes scanned right past my father's outstretched hand, right past my mother's beaming smile. His gaze swept over them like they were empty space. And then his eyes found me. They widened, just for a second, and then the man snapped. His back went ramrod straight. His heels clicked together. His hand flew up in a salute that was so sharp it could cut glass. The crowd noise just died. "General Grant, sir?" His voice cracked through the silence. "I didn't know you'd be here." "An honor, ma'am." Dead. Silence. The world stopped. I could feel my father's smile freeze on his face. I could see my mother's jaw go slack, her mask of pride shattering into a million pieces. Alex just looked lost, utterly bewildered. And in that moment of absolute stillness, it wasn't triumph I felt. It was the cold, clear shock of water hitting your face. A part of me I had buried under years of their story, their lies, just clicked back into place. I could suddenly feel the exact weight of my medals in their velvet-lined box. The one my mother insisted on storing for safekeeping after my discharge. I remember her exact words. "Let's put these painful reminders away so you can start over, not reminders of service, but of pain." Her words, not mine. That first moment of shock is something else, isn't it? Tell me in the comments, what's the most outrageous lie someone has ever been caught in right in front of you? Because as I looked at their faces, really looked at them, I knew. It wasn't confusion I was seeing, it was fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. They hadn't just misunderstood my past. They hadn't just forgotten my rank. They had known. They had known, and they had built a multi-year conspiracy on the assumption that no one would ever find out. That a man like this drill sergeant would never walk up and expose them in a sunlit field full of people. Their shared panic was the first exhibit in a trial that had just unofficially begun. I held the drill sergeant's gaze, and I gave him a slow, deliberate nod. And just like that, the story they wrote for me was over. The day after the ceremony was quiet, an unnaturally quiet, suffocating kind of day. They walked around me on eggshells, my father avoiding my eyes, my mother trying to pretend nothing had happened. My brother was nowhere to be seen. I ignored them all. I went to my old bedroom, the one they'd kept like a shrine to the daughter they thought I was, and I opened my laptop. For years, I'd let myself be disconnected. They had spun the narrative of my failure so completely that I'd retreated, letting them handle my affairs while I recovered their words, their story. I accepted it. I trusted them. I navigated to the official VA benefits portal, a place I hadn't been in years. I entered the credentials I remembered. My fingers were steady on the keyboard. Click. Access denied. Okay. A mistake. I tried again. Slowly this time. Access denied. I clicked the forgot password link. A security question appeared. A question I had never set in my life. What is the name of your first pet? I didn't have a first pet, but my brother Alex did. A golden retriever named Buddy. I typed the name. And I was in. The shock from the ceremony was gone, and in its place, a cold resolve began to form. This wasn't a mistake. This was a locked door. It was the first moment I stopped thinking like a daughter and started thinking like an investigator looking at a crime scene. And then it clicked. A detail from years ago surfaced not as a memory but as evidence. A specific afternoon, right after my discharge, sitting at this exact desk, foggy on pain medication, my mother was there, offering to help organize what she called my confusing paperwork. She took my laptop. Her exact words were, "Let me just streamline all these passwords for you, honey. One less thing for you to worry about." She wasn't helping. She was seizing control. Have you ever been locked out of your own account and had that sinking feeling that something is deeply, deeply wrong? What was the security question that tipped you off? Tell me in the comments. The question itself was the first piece of hard evidence. It was proof. Undeniable proof that someone in my family, someone who knew about my brother's dog, had intentionally and systematically taken over my official identity. They didn't just lock me out of an account, they locked me out of my own life. A locked digital door just means you find a physical key, or in this case, a digital backdoor they never thought I'd use. I couldn't trust the VA portal anymore, but I had other ways. I picked up my phone and logged into an old account for the Postal Service's Informed Delivery app, an account I set up ages ago, one they wouldn't have known about. And there it was, a stream of my life, in pictures, scans of every piece of official mail sent to me, letters from the Department of Defense, statements from the VA, and the delivery address listed for every single one of them was not my parents' house. It wasn't where I was sitting. It was a P.O. box in a town 30 miles away, the same town where my brother Alex lived. My fingers flew across the search bar. P.O. box registration is public record, if you know where to look. It wasn't registered to Alex. It was registered to a business named, and I had to read this twice, A. Grant Strategic Solutions. My initial, my last name. The resolve I felt before was now turning to ice. The scope of this was expanding with every click. My name, my identity, had been co-opted and turned into a corporate entity. This wasn't a recent mistake. This was systematic, it was planned, and it had been going on for years. The name itself was a clue that pointed to a much bigger lie. A lie my father helped build. It was like a tape started playing in my head. A memory of him complaining about the cost of Alex's so-called specialized training and networking seminars. His words echoed, "It's a steep investment, but your brother has a real head for business. He's going to make us all proud." He wasn't just investing in his son. He was investing in a fraud. For those who have dealt with something like this, with identity theft, what was it? What was the one piece of mail, the one weird charge, that broke the whole case open for you? This P.O. box, this sham company. This was the cornerstone. It was the physical address of the conspiracy. It was the link that tied my stolen identity directly to my brother's fraudulent success. My brother wasn't just the golden child. He was a ghost company, and Dinmanma's the ghost. The company had my name. The next question was simple. Did it have my money? I couldn't use the front door they had barred, so I used a door they didn't know existed. I made a call. To a former colleague in military finance. I didn't explain the situation. I didn't get emotional. I used language we both understood, coded, professional. I wasn't a daughter asking for a favor. I was an officer activating a professional courtesy. An hour later, an email arrived. A secured PDF. My full military pay and benefits statement, pulled directly from the source, bypassing the compromised VA portal entirely. I opened the file, and the ice in my veins turned to steel. My disability benefits. They had always told me it was a tiny stipend, barely enough to get by. It wasn't. It was a substantial monthly sum, and it had been deposited faithfully every single month for the past 4 years. And every single month, within 24 hours of deposit, the full amount was transferred out to a single unauthorized bank account. The numbers didn't lie. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. It wasn't about being erased. This was about grand larceny, cold hard financial fraud on a massive scale. And the memory that surfaced this time was so clear it burned. My mother, standing in this very room, handing me a crumpled $100 bill, her face a mask of pity. "Just to help you get by," she'd said. "We know things are hard for you." I remember the sting of shame I felt taking that money. The lie was so complete, so insulting. What's the most shocking financial betrayal you can imagine? I want you to really think about that, and let me know in the comments. The bank statements were irrefutable. They showed a 4-year history of systematic theft. This was the proof that dismantled their entire narrative. They told me I was a charity case. The whole time, I was the benefactor. The withdrawals were clinical, methodical. But a system like that needs an origin point, an authorization. My contact sent one more file. A single scanned document. The original direct deposit authorization form, the one filed right after my discharge, the one that started it all. I opened it. It was a standard government form, full of my personal information. I scrolled to the bottom, to the signature block. The section that authorized the Department of Defense to send all my money to that newly discovered fraudulent account. And there it was, my name. Eleanor K. Grant. Except it wasn't my signature, not even close. I remember a commanding officer once telling me, "Grant, your signature looks like a weapon." It was sharp, angular, almost aggressive. This signature. This was a looping, neat, elegant cursive. It was flawless, and it was a perfect imitation of my mother's handwriting. The same handwriting I'd seen on a lifetime of birthday cards and checks. It was a forgery. This was the discovery that burned away all emotion, except for a cold, methodical purpose. The betrayal was now clinical. This was a crime scene with a clear perpetrator. The why didn't matter anymore. Only the how and the who. Do you have a super distinctive signature? Just drop a yes or no in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how many people think their signature could be forged by a loved one. This document, this single piece of paper, was the smoking gun. It proved intent. It proved premeditation. It proved that my mother, the chief gaslighting officer, was an active participant from the very beginning. She was the one who authorized the first step of the crime. It was her handwriting. My mother didn't just tell a lie, she signed her name to it. After I found the forged signature, my mother's signature, everything changed. The grief, the shock, it was still there, but it solidified into something else. Something cold and hard and useful. I looked around my childhood bedroom, at the soft things my mother had placed over the years. The faded floral wallpaper, the plush pillows, the sentimental objects. All of it was part of the set design for their play, the story of the fragile daughter who couldn't cope. The story was over, so I started tearing down the set. I boxed it all up, every last piece of the person they pretended I was. The room became an empty shell, a blank slate. Then I went out and I bought a large whiteboard, the kind you find in a briefing room. I bought several packs of color-coded markers. I came back, mounted the board on the wall, and began to work. The process was familiar, a muscle memory I hadn't used in years, the smell of the dry erase markers, the systematic organization of chaos into a clear plan of attack. It was the same process I'd used in command tents in dusty, forgotten places. This wasn't new to me. It was a return to form. At the top of the board, in red marker, I wrote their titles. Not their names. Their roles in the conspiracy. CGO, mother, silent chairman, father, golden child CEO, Alex. Then I started drawing the lines. A black line from the CGO to a box labeled forged signature. A green line from the golden child to the sham company and the P.O. box. A blue line from the silent chairman to a box marked known financial transfers. I mapped the flow of money, the flow of information, the flow of deceit. The room was no longer a bedroom. It was a case file. I was no longer Grant, the failed daughter. I was General Grant, the strategist. The grief was compartmentalized. The mission was clear: assemble an unbreakable case. If you had to build a case against someone, what's the first thing you would buy? A whiteboard? A burner phone? A specific software? Let me know your PI starter pack in the comments. Looking at the board, seeing all the evidence physically connected for the first time, it clarified the entire operational flow. It showed me where the weaknesses in their conspiracy were. It showed me where to press next. They thought this was my sick room. I decided it was my war room. A map is useless until you start moving. The whiteboard gave me the strategy. Now I needed to execute. I began a series of precise legal maneuvers designed to reclaim territory. First, a call to my bank. I didn't plead. I didn't explain the family drama. I identified myself with my full name, rank, and military service number credentials my mother and brother couldn't possibly possess. I reported unauthorized activity on an account linked to my name. The tone in the security officer's voice changed immediately. Within 10 minutes, the fraudulent account my brother was using was frozen. One click of a lock. Next, I went to the public library. I wasn't using my home computer or my personal phone for this. I sat at a secure terminal and began the paperwork. Official change of address forms filed with the Postal Service, redirecting all my mail, all of it, to a new secure box under my sole control. Another click. Then, the VA. I navigated their website, my website, and initiated a fraud report. I uploaded a scan of my military ID. I answered security questions they had never changed because they never imagined I would get this far. I reported the unauthorized access, the suspicious password recovery question, everything. I requested my access be restored with new, ironclad security protocols. Every form submitted, every call made, was another small victory. It was a reversal of their actions. I was not a victim, begging for help. I was an operator, methodically taking back my own life piece by piece. There's a memory from my actual service that fits this perfectly: the process of coordinating logistics for a major operation, filling out requisitions for equipment, personnel, transport. The inviolable rule was always, if it's not on the form, it doesn't exist. I was now applying that same ruthless adherence to procedure. I was creating a paper trail of my own, one of reclamation, one of justice. And then it came, the key discovery. An email, not from a person, but from the system. The subject line read, VA Fraud and Security Services, case opened. I had a case number, an official file within a government agency. It was the first external validation that what happened wasn't just a family squabble. It was a crime they were now investigating. That case number legitimized my entire fight. It meant I wasn't alone anymore. I had the power of a federal agency behind me. What's the most satisfying official task you've ever completed? Paying off a loan? Getting a passport? Changing your name? Share that moment of bureaucratic triumph. That email, that simple case number, was everything. It was proof that my strategy was working. They used paperwork to erase me. So I'm going to use paperwork to bury them. I had reclaimed my assets. Now I needed to understand the law. My whiteboard was a map of their crimes, but I needed a legal framework to prosecute them. So I made another call, this time to a woman I served with, a friend, but more importantly, now a high-powered JAG prosecutor. I didn't call her crying. I didn't tell her the emotional story of my family's betrayal. I presented the facts as if I were giving a mission briefing. My voice was even dispassionate. I'm compiling a file, I said. The charges appear to be identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, and larceny of federal benefits. I could hear the shift in her voice on the other end of the line. It went from friendly catch-up to the professionally severe tone of a prosecutor listening to testimony. She didn't offer pity. She didn't say she was sorry. She asked sharp, pointed questions. Then she advised me on the specific federal statutes that had likely been violated. She told me exactly what kind of evidence was needed, not just to confront them, but for a U.S. attorney to press charges. This conversation, this is what solidified my path. This was no longer just a personal matter. It was a federal case. The legal language she used gave me a new, powerful vocabulary to define what they did to me. It wasn't just stealing, it was wire fraud. It wasn't just lying, it was a conspiracy to defraud the government. Have you ever had a friend whose professional advice was more helpful than any amount of emotional support? What's their profession? This whole exchange felt so familiar. It was exactly like a pre-mission legal briefing she'd given years ago. She had stood in front of my unit and clearly, dispassionately, explained the rules of engagement and the legal consequences of failure. There was no emotion then, just clarity and purpose. I felt that same clarity now. Before we hung up, she said, "I'll email you a checklist." An hour later, it arrived. A list of documents to acquire. Bank records going back 5 years. Incorporation papers for the shell company. Tax filings. It was a step-by-step guide. A blueprint for justice. It was the exact evidence needed not just for a family confrontation, but for a potential criminal indictment. My friend didn't offer sympathy. She gave me a target list. It was exactly what I needed. The legal checklist from my JAG friend was my new mission plan, but to execute it, I needed more intelligence. It started arriving a few days later. After I'd rerouted my mail, a thick manila envelope landed in my new secure P.O. box. The return address was for my other P.O. box, the one my brother had set up. The one for his company. Inside was a trove of documents, bank statements for Grant Strategic Solutions. I laid them out. The first deposit, the seed money that started the entire company, was the exact amount of my first 6 months of back-paid disability benefits. It was all there. My money, funding my brother's dream. So I went online. I looked up his company's website. It was slick, professional, full of military jargon he barely understood. He billed himself as a protege of decorated flag officers, someone leveraging lessons from the front lines. His front lines were a 2-week training course in Georgia. He had pictures of himself at veteran business owner conferences, smiling, shaking hands. He looked the part. It was a good performance. It makes me think of him in high school, how he could effortlessly charm his way out of any trouble. He always had a plausible story, a confident smile. He was a born con man. And here he was, at his masterpiece. But the most disgusting part of his story was the one he was stealing from me. It brought back a memory so sharp, it felt like it was happening again. The slow, grueling work of physical therapy for my service-related injury. The hours spent learning to walk properly again. The pain that was a constant companion for years. He had taken that, my most vulnerable physical state, and monetized it. What's the absolute worst example of stolen valor you can imagine? I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comments, because I feel like I was living through it. I did a public records search, pulled the incorporation documents for his company. The list of board members was, conveniently, blank, but there was another document attached. An application for a small business loan. A loan and specifically for service-disabled veterans. And at the bottom of the page, in big red letters, was a single word. Approved. This wasn't just him lying to clients. This was a federal crime. This was the most damning piece of evidence yet. A conspiracy to defraud the United States government, using my name, my service, and my disability as the bait. He wasn't just living on my money. He was living on my time, my deployments, my scars. The loan application was the crime. But a crime that sophisticated needs a blueprint. A playbook. And I had a good idea who the author was. There was an old family iPad that sat on the coffee table in the living room, collecting dust. Everyone used it, and everyone stayed logged in. My mother was always logged into her iCloud account. One evening, when the house was finally empty and quiet, I picked it up. My hands were steady. I didn't feel like a snooping daughter. I felt like an investigator serving a warrant on a hostile target. I went straight to the iMessage archive. I searched for Alex's name. And I found it all. Years of messages. A complete, unabridged playbook for my own erasure, written by my mother. I started reading. The words were so calm, so clinical. Your sister is unwell. We need to handle her finances. Use this money for the business. It's what she would want if she were thinking clearly. Here is the new password for her VA account. Make sure you check it weekly for any notifications. And then, the one that made my blood run cold. The one that connected everything. When you apply for the loan, list your consultant's experience. That's her. Just don't use her name directly. Have you ever accidentally seen a text or email that revealed someone's true character? What did you do? Reading her words was like reading a manual on how to dismantle a human being. It was all there. The justification, the instructions, the conspiracy. And it brought a different kind of memory into focus. A memory of my mother comforting me after a PTSD-related panic attack a few years back. Her soft voice. Her gentle hand on my arm. Her words from back then. You're just not yourself, dear. Let us take care of things. They weren't words of comfort. They were the foundation of her entire deception. She wasn't caring for me. She was establishing my incompetence so she could take over. The betrayal was no longer an abstract feeling. It was written right there, in black and white, in her own words. This was the evidence of premeditation. The active, detailed conspiracy orchestrated by the chief gaslighting officer herself. She wasn't just gaslighting me. She was writing the instruction manual for my own erasure. The playbook was my mother's words. The business was my brother's face. But the early funding, the large cash infusions that came before, the fraudulent veteran loan, that was a missing piece of the puzzle. The messages gave me a clue where to look next. The shared family computer. My father, the silent chairman, was meticulous but not tech-savvy. I logged into his user profile. I opened his browser history. He'd been tracking Alex's business, clicking on every article, every mention. But he'd been searching for other things too. How to gift large sums of money without paying taxes. Rules for private loans between family members. He wasn't just a proud father watching from the sidelines. He was doing his research. He was an active participant. Then I went to the last place I had access to, our old joint bank account. An account I still had legacy access to that they'd never thought to remove. And I found them. A series of massive wire transfers from my father's personal investment account directly to Alex's business account. The sums were too large to be a simple gift. They were seed money, capital investment. He knew. There was no way he couldn't have known. He saw the name of the company, A. Grant Strategic Solutions. He saw the amounts. He just chose not to ask questions. His silence wasn't passive. It was a paid endorsement. This brought his whole persona into focus. I remembered him at the dinner table for years. Anytime a conflict arose, anytime my mother and I would argue, he would just hold up a hand and say, "I don't want to hear about it." His avoidance wasn't a personality quirk. It was his primary strategy. He bought peace with his money and his silence. What's worse in your opinion, the person who commits the act, or the person who quietly funds it and looks the other way? I want you to cast your vote in the comments. The wire transfer records were the final link. They proved his role as the silent chairman, the financier who enabled the entire conspiracy through willful ignorance and direct financial support. He wasn't silent because he was weak. He was silent because it was easier than being honest. My mother was the architect and my brother was the face of the company. But my father? He was the bank. The financial case was closed. The conspiracy was mapped out on my whiteboard. A web of lies connecting all three of them. But there was one more thread to pull. A small, insignificant detail from my brother's business website that had been bothering me since I first saw it. A so-called, candid office photo of him at his desk, looking thoughtful, looking like a leader. And on the corner of his desk, propped up on a little stand like an inspirational paperweight, was an object I recognized instantly. It was my Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest military award for valor. An award I earned for an action I have never spoken about with them. It was being used as a prop, a piece of set dressing for his stolen valor narrative. My heart was pounding, a cold, hard rhythm in my chest. I walked out of my room, down the hall to my mother's bedroom. I went to her closet, to the box where she was safekeeping my medals. I opened it. My other medals were there. The campaign ribbons, the commendations. But the velvet case for the DC, the most important one, was empty. The violation of this, it cut deeper than the money, deeper than the lies. It was a desecration. It was a theft of something sacred, something earned with blood and sacrifice and a choice I have to live with every single day. And it brought back a memory, but not a clear one. A fragmented, visceral flash of the event itself. Not the ceremony where they pinned the medal on my uniform, but the chaos that came before. The noise, the smoke, the screaming, the weight of a choice that had to be made in a split second. That is the true weight of the medal. The memory of that moment is what it represents. Is there an object in your life that is so personal, so profoundly a part of you, that having it stolen would be worse than any amount of money? What is it? The cold resolve I had felt for days now had a new core, a core of white-hot focused anger. This was the final piece of evidence, the one that showed the true depth of their disrespect. They didn't just take what I had. They took who I was. They didn't just steal my money. They stole my scars. They stole my ghosts. The white-hot anger I felt after finding the empty medal case had to go somewhere. Anger like that is a fuel. But if it's not channeled, it just burns you down. I chose to channel it. The time for discovery was over. It was time to forge the weapons. I went to an office supply store. I purchased a high-quality laser printer, a scanner, and 4 3-inch black binders. For the next week, my war room became a production facility. I worked with the clinical precision of an intelligence analyst preparing for a high-level briefing. I printed every single piece of evidence I had gathered. Every digital ghost, every painful memory, was transformed into tangible, undeniable proof. First, the forgery. A high-resolution scan of the direct deposit authorization, my mother's elegant cursive signing away my name. Then, the bank statements. Page after page showing the systematic flow of my disability benefits out of my account and into theirs. The wire transfers from my father's investment portfolio, clear, undeniable proof of his role as the financier. I printed the screenshots of my mother's iMessages to my brother, her entire playbook of manipulation and instruction, word for word. I printed the fraudulent service-disabled veteran-owned small business loan application, the cornerstone of their federal crime. I printed the incorporation papers for A-Grant Strategic Solutions, the shell company built on my name. And finally, I printed a high-resolution copy of that promotional photo, the one with my Distinguished Service Cross sitting on my brother's desk like a trophy. Each piece of paper was slid into its own clear plastic sleeve. Each one was a fact that could not be argued with. This whole process felt familiar. It was the same skill set I'd perfected under pressure when preparing briefing books for senior command staff. The exacting standards, the color-coded tabs, the absolute necessity of having every single fact triple-checked and sourced. I was applying that same discipline now, but this time, it was for my own liberation. What's the most organized you've ever been for a project? Tell me about your binder, your spreadsheet, your whiteboard masterpiece. Because this was mine. I created a cover page for each binder. I typed out the title in a simple block font. The Prosecution of Case Taven 78A-4. Evidence Dossier. I printed 4 copies of the cover page and slid them into the front of the 4 binders, one for each of them, and one for my lawyer. The process was methodical. It was almost therapeutic. When I was done, I stacked the binders on my desk. I put my hand on top of the stack. Holding the physical weight of them, the sheer volume of their lies and my proof, made the entire case real in a way it hadn't been before. The weapon was now forged, and it was ready. I wasn't writing a letter. I was building a cage made of paper. The dossiers were complete. The weapons were forged. But before any operation, you do one last reconnaissance check. You confirm the target's current disposition. You make sure you have the most up-to-date intelligence before you engage. I had to be certain that nothing had changed, that this wasn't some terrible mistake they had already started to regret or undo. I had to close any potential escape routes for them, and for my own conscience. Have you ever had to make that one last, nerve-wracking call to confirm your suspicions before a major confrontation? How did you feel right before you dialed? I felt a cold calm. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank that had issued the fraudulent business loan to my brother. When a loan officer answered, I didn't introduce myself as a family member. My voice was official, detached. "This is General Eleanor Grant," I said. "I'm conducting an audit related to the potential misuse of my service record in a loan application." The line went quiet for a moment. Then the loan officer, suddenly very nervous, asked how he could help. I asked a simple, direct question. Is the loan issued to A. Grant Strategic Solutions currently in good standing? He put me on a brief hold. When he came back, he confirmed that it was. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "A payment was made just last week." I asked one more question. "From what account was that payment sourced?" He told me it was the same account my father had been wiring money to. This was the final check on their position. It confirmed everything. The conspiracy was active. It was ongoing. My father was still funding the lie. This whole situation felt just like the final moments before a mission, that tense period of waiting for the last piece of intel from a scout in the field. The confirmation that the target is where you expect them to be, that the operational plan is still viable. This call was that final piece of intel. I made one more call, this time to the drill sergeant from the ceremony. I thanked him again for his recognition that day, for being the catalyst for all of this. Then I asked him for a professional favor. "I need a character statement about my brother, Alex Grant," I said, "as you observed him during his training." I told him to be brutally honest. Later that day, his response arrived via email. It was short and it was damning. It read, "Sir, with all due respect, Cadet Grant has potential but lacks integrity. He talks a great game, but he isn't a leader." That was it. The final piece of external validation. The confirmation that the loan was active proved they had no remorse. The drill sergeant's email proved my brother's entire persona was a facade, even to the professionals who trained him. Any shred of doubt I had about the necessity of a direct confrontation was gone. They hadn't stopped. It wasn't a mistake they were sorry for. It was an operation that was still running. The final recon check was complete. The weapons were forged and stacked on my desk. The intelligence was confirmed. The enemy's position was unchanged. There was nothing left to do but execute the plan. The following Friday, I sent a single text message from my phone to my mother, my father, and my brother. It was simple, and it was direct. Family meeting, my room, Sunday at 2 p.m. It's important. No explanation. Emotion. The unusual formality, the confidence, was designed to set them on edge, and it worked. On Sunday, I prepared my space. My war room. I sat behind my desk, which I'd positioned in the center of the room. Behind me, the whiteboard with its web of deceit was covered by a plain gray sheet. In front of me, I placed the 3 black binders in a neat, formidable stack. I felt no fear. I felt no anxiety. The exhaustive preparation, the weeks of methodical work, had burned all of that away. All that was left was a profound and unshakable sense of calm. The kind of calm I've only ever felt walking into a high-stakes negotiation with foreign military officials. The practiced calm that comes from knowing you have every fact on your side. The understanding that the first person to lose their composure loses. How do you set the stage for a serious conversation? Do you pick a neutral place? Your own territory? Tell me your strategy. I believe in controlling the terrain. At precisely 2 o'clock, they filed in, one by one. My mother first, with an expression of forced brightness and annoyance. My father next, looking nervous, already in his default mode of conflict avoidance. And finally, my brother Alex, trying to project an air of casual confidence that he didn't feel. They looked at me, then their eyes fell to the 3 black binders stacked on the desk, and a collective silence fell over them. The fake smiles, the nervous energy, it all just evaporated, and that silence, that was their first confession. It was a visual confirmation that they knew, on some primal level, that this wasn't a discussion. It wasn't a plea for understanding. It was a reckoning. For the first time in years, they were coming to my space, on my terms. The trial was in session. They sat in the chairs I had arranged opposite my desk. They looked like defendants. My mother started to speak first, some placating nonsense about how we all needed to talk. It was the voice she'd used on me my whole life to dismiss my feelings. I held up a single hand. A quiet gesture of command. "I won't be taking questions until the presentation is complete," I said. My voice was even, level. It held no anger, no emotion at all. It was the voice of a prosecutor about to read an indictment. I reached for the top binder, opened it, and turned to the first tab. My presentation followed the same format I'd used 100 times to deliver after action reports in the service. Statement of fact. Supporting evidence. Conclusion. A process designed to strip emotion away and leave only the operational truth. Charge 1, I began. Forgery. I slid the first plastic-sleeved document across the desk. It was the high-resolution scan of the direct deposit form. I pushed it towards my mother. "Mother, is this your handwriting?" She wouldn't look at it. Her eyes darted around the room, anywhere but at the evidence of her own hand. That was confession number 2. I moved to the next tab. Charge 2, grand larceny. I slid out the next set of documents. Years of my bank statements, showing my disability benefits being deposited, and then drained, month after month after month. 4 years of systematic withdrawals totaling over $150,000. My father's face, I noted, turned ashen. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Confession number 3. I turned to my brother, which leads to charge 3, conspiracy to defraud the United States government. I slid the approved SDVOSB loan application across the desk to him. His name was on it. The business name was on it. And the box checked, certifying the business was owned by a service-disabled veteran, was based on MA Mine Service. "Alex," I said, my voice still perfectly level, "your entire company was funded with stolen money and built on a lie about my sacrifice." He started to stammer, to bluster, but no coherent words came out. Confession number 4. I continued like this, page by page, document by document, the incorporation papers, the bank transfers, the screenshots of the iMessages, my mother's explicit instructions on how to perpetrate the fraud. For almost an hour, I presented the undeniable facts of their conspiracy. This was the grim satisfaction I had been working toward. Each document I presented was a brick being laid in the wall, separating my old self from my new one. I wasn't destroying my family. I was presenting the results of the autopsy of a relationship they had killed long ago. What is more powerful in a confrontation, raw emotion, or cold hard facts? I want you to cast your vote, emotion, or facts, in the comments. I had made my choice. I wasn't yelling. I was reading. And with every page, I could see them getting smaller and smaller. I reached the final tab in the binder. The clinical presentation was over. My voice dropped just a little, became quieter but held more weight, and finally, I said, "A personal matter." I slid the last document across the desk. It was the glossy promotional photo of Alex in his office. I put my finger on the corner of his desk in the photo, on the small object propped up on a stand. My Distinguished Service Cross. I looked at my brother. "You took my medal." Then I looked at my mother. "You gave him my medal." The air in the room became thick, heavy. This was the one charge that wasn't about money or federal law. This was about something else entirely. It was about honor. And the memory that gives that piece of metal its meaning isn't the battle itself, it's the quiet moment after. When my commanding officer, a man of few words, looked at me and gave a simple solemn nod of respect. That silent acknowledgement from a fellow soldier of a sacrifice made. That is what the medal truly represents. That is the thing my family had desecrated and turned into a cheap prop. Have you ever had to use an intensely personal secret as a final blow in an argument? Did you regret it, or was it necessary? I let the accusation hang in the air for a long moment. Then, I stood up, reached behind me, and with one smooth motion, I pulled the sheet off the whiteboard. I revealed the entire conspiracy, mapped out in red, black, and blue ink. The lines, the dates, the amounts, all of it connecting the three of them in an undeniable web of deceit. They stared at it, their faces slack with shock. Seeing their actions laid out so clinically, so completely, with no room for argument or justification, was the final, devastating blow. The case was closed. I looked at them, these three people who were my whole world, and I spoke in a near whisper. This is what you did. I paused. All of it. This final piece of evidence wasn't for a court of law. It was for the court of conscience, and I knew it was the one charge that would haunt them forever. The money was a crime. The medal, that was a sin. They sat there in the ruins of the life they had invented, surrounded by the evidence of their crimes. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only when my mother began to cry, not the wrenching sobs of remorse, but the soft calculated weeping of a manipulator who has run out of moves. It was the CGO's classic tactic, her final pathetic attempt to seize emotional control. And for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. I observed her tears as a strategy, not an emotional event. This clinical detachment, this was the proof of my own liberation. My father just stared at the whiteboard, his face a blank mask of shock. Alex looked utterly defeated, a hollowed-out version of the golden child. I let the silence sit for a moment longer. Then I spoke. My voice was calm, clear. Here is what happens now. The words were not a suggestion. They were the terms of a treaty, the verdict in a trial they had already lost. This moment felt familiar, like a memory of accepting the surrender of an opposing force. The protocol is always clear, the terms non-negotiable. The goal is not to punish, but to end the conflict and establish a new reality. One, I said, holding up a finger. You will liquidate any remaining assets in Alex's company. You will transfer the full sum of my stolen benefits, plus interest calculated at the prime rate over 4 years, to an account I will provide. You have 30 days. 2. You will issue a formal, written apology to me. It will detail your actions. I may or may not choose to accept it. 3. You will retrieve my Distinguished Service Cross. It will be returned to me by tomorrow at noon. I paused, letting the first 3 terms sink in. Then I delivered the last one. And 4. We are done. This relationship, in any form, is hereby severed. When you cut someone toxic out of your life, is it better to leave the door open a crack or slam it shut and bolt it? I want to know your take in the comments. I had made my decision. I reached for the 4th untouched binder on my desk. I slid it into the center of the table between us. This last copy is for my lawyer, I said softly. Whether I forward it, along with my testimony, to the U.S. Attorney's Office depends entirely on your full and immediate compliance with the terms I have just outlined. I felt an unshakable, calm power. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a sentence. I had considered all outcomes, and I was prepared for any of them. For the first time, I was completely free of their influence, their narrative, their control. I wasn't asking for my life back. I was informing them that I had already taken it. I stood up. The meeting was over. Without another word, I walked out of my room, past them, down the stairs, and out the front door of the house I grew up in. I got in my car and drove away, and I didn't look back. The fallout began within hours. It was exactly what I expected. My phone became a battlefield of their desperation. A flood of text messages from my mother, a chaotic barrage that cycled between rage at my disrespect, pity for my damaged state, and breathless pleas for forgiveness. Then a single voicemail from my father. He just sounded old and tired. His only words were, "I don't know what to say." Then came the panicked email from Alex, a long rambling screed begging me not to go to the authorities, promising he'd pay me back, promising he'd do anything. I read them all, every last word. But I did not reply. The experience felt strangely familiar, like monitoring enemy communications after a successful operation. It was just the chaotic, desperate chatter of a defeated force. It evoked no emotion in me, only a professional assessment that the mission was complete. They were no longer my family. They were just noise. What's the most powerful form of no contact? Blocking? Ignoring? Or my method? Reading their messages to confirm their state of mind and then deliberately, consciously, not replying? Tell me your go-to. The next morning, a small, heavy package arrived by courier. I signed for it. I took it inside. I opened it. Inside, nestled in its velvet case, was my Distinguished Service Cross. I picked it up. Holding it again felt right, not because they had returned it, but because I had taken it back. It was their first act of compliance, their first acknowledgement of my power and the undeniable reality of their defeat. It was the symbol of my victory in this, my most personal and most important battle. Their words were just noise now. The only thing that mattered was the weight of the metal in my hand. Months later, I'm in a new apartment, in a new city. The air here is clean. The apartment is quiet. The money, the full amount plus a painful amount of interest, appeared in my new bank account on the 29th day. A letter of apology arrived, typed, signed by all three of them. I read it once, and then filed it away without reply. The fourth binder remains with my lawyer. A permanent insurance policy against any future trouble. A reminder of the truth. I'm unpacking the last box. Inside is the metal. My metal. I take it out of its case, hold it for a moment, and then I do something that surprises even me. I don't display it on a shelf. I don't hang it on the wall. I open a drawer, the one where I keep my official service records and discharge papers, and I place it inside. It's a part of my history, a critical one, but it is not my entire identity. My worth isn't in the symbols of my past achievements. It's in the person I am today. And for the first time in years, my mind isn't flashing back to the past. Not to the command tents, not to the battles, not to the betrayals. It is entirely in the present, looking forward. Reclaiming my past has finally allowed me to be free of it. My phone buzzes. It's a text message. From the drill sergeant. It says, "General, ma'am, heard you relocated. If you ever need anything, the network is always here for you." I smile. A real, genuine, unburdened smile. I feel a sense of profound peace. It's not the giddy, triumphant feeling of revenge. It's the quiet, unshakable strength of sovereignty. I didn't just win a fight. I reclaimed myself. The future is a blank map, and I am the cartographer. Let me end with this. What is the first thing you would do to celebrate winning back your life? Drop your dream first day of freedom celebration in the comments. They told everyone I was a failure. The truth is, I just graduated.